The MSMEs of India have seen a wave of transformation over the last couple of years, growing one step at a time. However, this growth comes with its own set of challenges. As the Union Budget 2025 is set to be tabled on February 1, today we have brought together experts and industry leaders to discuss these challenges and opportunities. We have with us Anil Bhardwaj, Secretary General of FISME, Vinod Kumar, President of India SME Forum, Mahavir Pratap Sharma, past chairman and current board member of Carpet Export Promotion Council, and Samir Gogia, Executive Director of Deloitte India. Welcome, everyone. So Mahavir, as you must know, last year the government introduced the 45-day payment rule, which was very heavily debated as well. The July budget kept it unchanged, and now it's been about 9 months since the rule came into effect. So, what's the sentiment now towards it in the industry?
The sentiment has not changed much. I think the industry, which has long life cycles, like handicrafts and carpets and apparel, we are, struggling to keep up to date with the law. Though the law has not actually been, strongly enforced, in my opinion. But I personally feel that nothing has changed on the ground. I think the challenges of payments. Everyone says that if we are ensuring payments to our suppliers, who's ensuring our payments? So the ground realities are still the same. People have, kind of come to come terms with it. But end of the year, financial year, February, March, where in the income tax implications of the said law kick in, is when everyone gets, realistic, and no one and everyone stops buying from 15th of February onwards, because they'll have to pay before March, otherwise it'll be added in their income. So basically what the government has done is nothing on the ground in terms of manufacturers, exporters in the MSME sector. They have just killed the purchases that were to happen in the last 45 days of the financial year. And the suppliers who need to sell to people who are paying in 60 days or 90 days, absolutely conveniently billing them post-April or supplying them post-April. So I don't think it has helped much. The largest buyer, in my opinion, for all the small sectors or all small supplies, which is the public sector or the government, they're not paying in 45 days either during the year. So I don't know where this law is. We, as exporters or manufacturers, are okay with it because we've lost hope that will change. And we have worked our way around it, and our cycles continue. Interest costs or on capital invested or operational costs has gone up. We have parked that, and inflation would obviously go up. So anyone who's supplying to the local Indian market, the prices have gone up because the costs have gone up on interest that the cash flow requires. So I think all in all, I'm not sure if it's benefited the small suppliers. I don't know if the consumer is paying for the interest costs that we as manufacturers or exporters and wholesalers have to live with. And not that income tax has increased or that implication has changed on the balance sheet. It'll continue to stay the same. So, like many other laws, this is a law that has no substance or actually requirement, in my opinion, and we're living with it.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. Coming to you now, Vinod. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of efforts and initiatives going towards digital trade and e-commerce exports. Despite that, e-commerce exports account for just 1 to 2% of total merchandise exports of India, which is way less than our competitors, like China or Vietnam, where the number is around 6 to 9%. So, what steps do you think we need to take to change this number?
Uh, Garima, thank you for the question. In fact, when you said 6 to 9%, you see, we have to look at the absolute numbers. The absolute numbers remain that cross-border e-commerce export around the world is around $800 billion. out of which China um, manages or handles a majority of this number. So around 320 odd billion is done by China. Now, then there are the Vietnams and the Philippines and the other countries which also contribute to all of this. But when we talk about India, we are at a cumulative $2 billion from the last 4 or 5 years that we have been making efforts. There are loads and loads of e-commerce exporters in India that are selling through on various platforms around the world, not just on platforms that are already in India, but also on platforms that are not in India and only are in certain parts of the world. But the problem is, you see, there is still, in fact, if even if we have a situation where we have the foreign trade policy, which is talking about an e-commerce export chapter for the first time now, but the fact is that in terms of logistics, in terms of our logistics hubs, in terms of the way we are still doing the paperwork or doing the compliance, all of that is no way commensurate to what an e-commerce exporting country should have. We are still behaving with the entire mentality or the mindset of a B2B exporter as a country. We forget financial incentives or anything of that sort. There's no ease. You see, for example, when you were to look at a B2B order and a B2B export, your numbers are way above $5,000-$10,000. When you look at e-commerce exports, numbers can be even as low as 25, 30, $40. So how can you have the same mechanism where you have to file these same bills and you have to get the foreign inwards remittance certificate for each of those, even though there has been an intervention in the form of an EDPMS, which is the electronic mechanisms for doing all of this. But we are far, far ahead when it comes to MSMEs who have gone ahead and are selling on platform, but they find when they are selling, after they are selling, when they come back, they are unable to meet the compliance requirements. So a majority of the export that is today happening from India in e-commerce is primarily happening to the sample route. So it's not in any books. So if as a country we are going to look at how can we reach maybe what we figured out as India SME Forum, that India has a definitive e-commerce export potential of $200 billion in the various markets that we've looked at. And what is required for us to attain this? A, compliances. How do we reduce compliances where there's no compliance? There was a time when sending something out, you needed a license. That's not the case anymore. So sending something out of India, except when it's cash or currency or whatever else, should be allowed. And there should not be restrictions on that. I can understand imports. We want to look at what is coming in and all that, but export should be as freely available as possible. A. B, we should have enough mechanisms. We now have the India Post, which is looking at entering into the logistics and the shipping and the business of actually picking up the packages and getting them delivered. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done there. We're talking about, the first fact is that majority of our people don't even know the fact that, their products can be sold through e-commerce around the world. We still are far, far ahead from this push that we talk about for, a normal micro enterprise or a small enterprise who can have a market around the world, which is exactly what China or a Vietnam or a Philippine or any of these countries are doing. It's their regular micro entrepreneur or a small entrepreneur who is actually going and selling or making his or her product available to customers around the world directly. And that is what is behind the success of their exports as far as B2C exports are concerned. Now, when you look at all of the various things, one glaring deficiency that we have in India, and I have been pointing this out for the last 6, 7 years. You look at majority of the exporting countries, they don't sit in their country and try to manage the markets around the world. As a country, we may be the only large country which wants to become a major player as far as the first three economies of the world, which is still having a situation where our one person in our embassy is looking after our commercial possibilities and promoting exports, which cannot be. We need to and the expectation from the government has been that we have looked at this government as a radical transformation force for everything that is happening. But this mechanism of having a person in an embassy, the commercial attaché most probably, who is going to help us in exports or help MSMEs in exports, it's a no-brainer. It won't happen. When you compare this to a Korea, for example, Korea in India today has more than 300 employees, which are trying to find mechanisms, ways and means of getting their people to export products to India. A country like US, the US has a commercial service which has 6 offices in India with over 1,100 staff, which is actually looking at promoting their products into India. But what we are doing is we are hoping that this one gentleman who is sitting in some embassy in the market will try and do all the deals and find us the possibilities of exports, find us buyers, find us the opportunities and all that. It is a no-brainer. There, we cannot do it anymore like that. We need to have a organization which is front-ending MSME exports, and that organization has to be based in the countries where we are expecting exports to happen. It cannot be any other way, because we cannot expect anymore in the market saying that we are sitting in Delhi and we'll control or we promote our exports from Delhi. It's similar to what we've done. Let's say, for example, when we talk about tourism. In tourism, we put on this one officer in every embassy, and we said that he or she is going to push the Incredible India campaign. But you look at the other countries, what they are doing. You have tourism offices in India. There are more than 30 tourism offices in India who are trying to get your people to go out of India, but we are unable to get more people into India. So that is, it's exactly what I say, a paradigm shift that needs to happen when it comes to exports. And that is what is required if we want our micro, small, medium enterprises to actually be globally competitive or be embedded in global value chains.
Yes, absolutely. So just that you talked about micro and MSMEs need to be globally competitive. So Sameer, that's what my next question for you is that there's been a lot of talk about this, making them globally competitive. However, on ground, a lot of MSMEs they just continue to grapple with challenges around technical upgradation, quality issues. So what needs to be tweaked in the policies around skilling, perhaps, or what else has to be done to around this?
Thanks. Actually, if we look at this scenario, we look at total number, what we are projecting. I think India is looking for a 5 trillion economy, with MSME expected to grow at 1 trillion by 2028. So if we are looking at that scenario, what we need to do from a government perspective is they need to increase their expenditure on public capital expenditure, which will actually enhance the creation of more digital platform. So if we look at MSME, they are actually working on three different scenarios. We need to work on three different scenarios. One is they need to have a specific training program which can enhance their skill. They need to be digitally aware. Digital literacy need to be go deep down. And also the development of the entrepreneur. If we look at the current workforce skill, once government starts spending more on this public capital expenditure, they'll invest more on these platforms where these MSME can actually come up with that number. If we see last year interim budget have around 22,000 crores allocated to MSME sector. Again, this effort need to continue from the government side. They need to have a priority access to the skill development program. They need to have more of the digital as well as the physical virtual platform aware, because the current scenario, what MSME are facing is they don't have access to that, or they don't have a knowledge about that. So that need to be upgraded so that they can come into that mainframe. And I think the other speakers have already talked about the credit facility and other things. If we see, the current scenario is that only 14 to 16% of the MSME currently have access to the credit gap. So that also is much below the standard as far as other developing countries are concerned. So that gap need to be eradicated. They need to be brought into that thing. And also, I think creating more virtuals, connecting them to more facilities which government have, making them aware, I think that can really help them coming to that.
Okay, all right. So, we talked about, I'll have you for the another question. So, we talked about e-commerce. I also now want to look at quick commerce. So, Samir, for the domestic MSMEs, your local small businesses and kirana stores, they appear to have taken a hit due to quick commerce. So, what sort of support mechanisms from the budget we can come up, for these small businesses? Something perhaps similar to ONDC, maybe?
I think the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana and the dedicated institute for MSME, such as small development bank, they need to be actually uh, go in for more providing these more facilities, credit facilities. Most of the retailers, small retailers or kirana store are not aware of those policies. They need to be brought into the mainstream with them. With regard to tax policies, I see there are a lot of compliances issues with small retailers. I think the GST compliances as well as the direct tax compliances, they need to be eased up for them to actually compete with other big e-commerce players in the market. I think also, I think the financial literacy I'm talking about that more. The reason is that most of the facilities are available on ground, but they're not being utilized by them. So that need to be they need to be made aware that they can access all these information. I think that's the crux what they need to focus on.
And like I mentioned about the quick commerce part. So do they also need to look at start adapting the tech savvy ways? Maybe look at something around when this is something like that could come up for quick commerce part for us.
Yeah, I think what we need to focus, I think the government need to focus is they need to have more of the skill development institutes as well, where they need to the grassroots people they need to be made aware of what all skills they'll be requiring to actually access all these portals. So I think if you're looking at quick commerce, most of the things are done by either the individual entrepreneur themselves or their workforce, and that need to be uplifted. I think I'm stressing upon the public capital expenditure from the government side. That's the need of the hour. They need to spend more on those facilities to actually provide access to the people who are at the lower criteria or who are into quick commerce. I think that's the need of the hour.
Garima, I can come in for a minute on this topic. It's very important. It's a very important question, and it merits couple of thought-provoking answers, I would say. First is, where is the place where the government can ease or give them some leeway? A, the GST. Let's say, for example, if e-commerce or any online marketplace, etc., is able to sell, it's an organized operation, so it has people, it has compliance and all the other things. Can the government reduce compliance for the kiranas so that all of them come into the GST fold, and so that all of them can actually have billing softwares, so that they can get online? Each one of our people today, there are millions of users of WhatsApp, there are millions of users of Instagram and Facebook and whatnot and whatnot. It is not very difficult for an illiterate person to go online, is it? In today's situation, no. If that is true, then they can also take their business online and they can give a run for their money to the e-commerce suppliers. But the problem is we are unable to, show them that light. Instead of that, we are going around and round and round and, making them feel that, e-commerce or Q-commerce is a problem. The fact is, if we, for example, if you buy Colgate toothpaste from e-commerce, it is whatever, you are paying maybe 18% of GST. If you buy it from the local kirana or a micro enterprise, it should be 9%. So you are competitive. You are able to. The government is also getting more and more people onto the board. You'll have millions and millions of kirana guys. You see, you only have 1 crore people today on GST. But you are talking about 8 crore plus enterprises, including traders and others. So if you are able to get 8 crore people into the GST ambit by just offering some sort of a competitive rate for micro enterprises, I think that will be a game changer. Automatically, all of these guys will come online. You will have a situation where you will have millions and millions of people that will be able to sell to their local next door people, rather than somebody coming from somewhere else and selling to people in your catchment area.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Vinod. Mr. Bhardwaj, the issue of credit crunch for MSMEs and exporters has been there for quite some time. Many have said that since the pandemic, the capital needs have grown. However, despite all the talk of digital lending and various other innovations, the lending ways have not really changed. So, what are your thoughts on this?
No, that's correct. I mean, after pandemic, the problem of accessing credit and particularly timely credit continues to be a challenge for MSMEs. And some of the sectors which have been hit during the pandemic, and especially during the crisis uh, born out of the geopolitical conflicts in Middle East, as well as the Russia-Ukraine war, there had been supply chain disruptions, and some of the very smart MSMEs who have been otherwise doing very well and uh, trade, I mean, those have been hit, and their working capital cycles were affected. So the problems that they're facing is that, sudden requirement of funds they had not been able to meet through the banking channels, because banks have their own time cycles, in order to upgrade or enhance the limits. Whereas the requirement of MSMEs comes suddenly, and somehow MSMEs have to find ways to fulfill those needs. Some of them tap, fund sources from their friend circle, friends and relatives. But sometimes, I mean, those become inadequate, and then they get into a spiral of a problem where they find it very difficult to service the loans. And although ECLGS had been, to some extent or to a large extent, had been very helpful to MSMEs during the pandemic period, but ECLGS also expired, it had an expiry date. And after that, after 21 especially, in the conflict affected MSMEs, found it very difficult. There was no support system available. And they face problems of SMA, special mention accounts, their loans getting into NPAs. And I mean, we have seen, I mean, successfully running units who had been doing very well for 20, 30 years, suddenly found them into a spiral uh, uh, of not being able to serve the loans and get into NPAs. The request, therefore, from many sectors had been that, there should be a review of a special mention account mechanism of RBI, and it should be made more liberal and pragmatic and practical, and so that, people who are affected through a very state-jacketed system of SMA would be given a reprieve, and they could be held and provided a way out so that they can come out again and start doing business again.
Mahavir, I'll come to you now. In terms of manufacturing, MSMEs have been facing the issue of competitively priced raw materials and inputs as well. So, can you tell us more about this disparity that's there between domestic and international raw materials and the challenges that you're seeing around in your network?
Um, so there are, in terms of raw material, which is domestically procured and internationally sourced, the price disparity or the cost of goods going up has been very, very challenging. I think with the rupee depreciating, the forward outlook looking more grimmer and touching 90 or above, the imported raw material costs and quotations for exporters to their possible importers based upon the raw material future imported cost is very, very subjective and speculative. And a 5-10% fluctuation in any currency or import cost of raw material is not something very small. So that is one worrisome figure. Most of the domestic raw material suppliers are also struggling, especially agriculture-based raw material with MSPs and the variables that the government can announce at any point of time does worry, and everyone has become a very, very buy on spot, price on spot, and then quote kind of a model. So the fluctuation in costs of raw material, both international and domestic, or the worry that they might go up is something that is not very healthy. With oil prices going up and Russia and the global turmoil, the fear of increasing prices is going up. Now, for a projected delivery in summer or winter or fall this year, the pricing quotations are going higher and higher. And that makes us not competitive in comparison to China's of the world. And that is not something very, very good. So that is why the short-term and medium-term outlook export future is not looking good, because we as raw material are very, very speculated in terms of what needs to be done. Interest costs are highest in India. So, in all, with the uncertainty of the interest equalization scheme, the rupee dollar exchange rate and import cost, raw materials, especially in the agri-tech sector, it makes us very, very not compatible with countries that we are competing with, whether it's Turkey, whether it's China, whether it's Indonesia, whatever the product or service, or Bangladesh for that matter in the apparel sector. So I think it is a worrisome element. I think stability in terms of foreign currency, stability in terms of short-term outlook on interest and raw material supplies are very, very critical for a good growth going forward. And I think we were struggling to match whether to go domestic or international or what not to do. That's the challenge.
Okay, all right. Let's now talk about gender gap, and for that, Vinod, you're aware that the women's participation in MSMEs continue to be less than ideal. Only about 20% of MSMEs in India are led by women. So, what steps you propose we need to take here to improve this gap?
Well, Garma, there are a couple of schools of thought on this. One is that, what the government has already done, which is that when it comes to Lakpati Didis and, looking at the SHGs, you're talking about crores of women that are part of the SHG movement today. And then there are almost around 20 lakhs which are part of the Vishwakarma scheme which the government of India put in place. So, how can we create higher order enterprises from the same women? These are all people that are doing odd jobs, some or the other small means of livelihood. None of them are actually organized, none of them are regularized, none of them have company or firm or any structure per se to be formally financed. So most of them are primarily using funds from the Mudra or the SHG movement. My feeling is that India should focus on how we can create a sustainable movement for more and more women entrepreneurs to be created, both in urban as well as local areas. And my feeling is, if we are able to create a concerted plan, nothing less than 3 crore women can actually contribute to the Indian economy very, very easily if there is a concerted plan where the government creates a specific budget, creates a fund specific to women, both in terms of literacy, skilling, as well as for financing them. These three things, along with digital paraphernalia that the government is already putting in place, providing at various places, including the digital, financing, digital transfer of money, etc., etc., etc. Along with the fact that they are also looking at now compliance, which is completely digital. I think that can easily create 3 crore new women entrepreneurs, each with the Honorable Prime Minister's vision, which is like each woman should have a lakh of rupees as turnover or income every month, and that is very very easily possible. The fact that you already have states which have information on self-help groups, which have information on which are the women-centric clusters, where are the hubs, uh, com- and there are loads and loads of corporates. If you go on to CSR, you'll find hundreds of companies working in this area, but there's no concerted effort. If the government was to put all of this in one place and create a plan, maybe a 3, 4, 5 year plan, uh, creating 3 crore new entrepreneurs, which essentially would mean nothing less than 10 crore jobs in the near future. That is not a problem at all.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So, I guess now it's time, we're going to I'm going to end this session with the final and main question for which we're here. Now, what are your expectations from the budget and what is on the wish list? So I think we'll begin with Mahavir. Yeah.
In the MSME sector and especially the export sector, we need long-term clarity. The interest equalization scheme, as you all know, was not extended beyond 31st of December. I mean, while we are succumbing to WTO compliances on tariffs, we're not competing globally on interest rates. So I think I am hoping that the budget would have a long-term announcement on interest rates for working capital or capital investments and export credit at a lower rate. Obviously, we're looking forward to RBI's lowering of rates anyways. So that's one wish list that we have. On the other side, I think we are hoping that the manufacturing sector, through the skilling, because we're losing skilled labor left, right, center, migration from India's core business verticals is moving to various other sectors, whether it's in the gig working economy, construction, and other related services, driving, guard, and stuff. So I think we need to have something of a sort where exports or manufacturing and output is linked to skill development and is handed over to individual manufacturers and exporters at a certain process. Because I think if we don't combine the impact with the outcome, a commercial outcome, it will not work. The government agencies or the skilling councils can only do so much, through workshops. Ultimately, commerce has to be linked to backward skilling. Otherwise, it will not work. And it's not a subsidy that we're looking at, but it's kind of integration where, like a GST kind of a thing, if we pay for skilling, we get credit elsewhere. Kind of a model, and not have to pay to train people, because we are going into rural sectors. We're going into women, becoming more artisans and craftsmen while they're sitting at home. So we're trying to empower India and take employment to the rural level. So I think if skilling can be connected to commerce and a scheme pan-India can be created where volume of turnover or taxes or profitability can be linked to the amount of skilling at the back end, I think that will be very good. Obviously, income tax rates reduction or streamlining or making it easier for us to file returns or comply would be a welcome move. If that can be achieved, I mean, those are the basic things that we are looking for.
All right. Thank you. Sameer?
Yeah, I think being from a tax background, I think my expectation for this budget, I'll be specific to the tax. I think one, we are looking forward for extending that concessional tax rate of 15% for the new domestic setup. I think we are looking forward that government extend that benefit. With regard to TDS and TCS, there are a lot of multiple rates. Most of the MSME and the small entrepreneur, they are not aware. So I think rationalization on that TDS and TCS compliances. GST also actually removing the inverted duty structure with GST, which actually enhances the domestic production. If you're looking at Make in India project from the government vision, I think completely removing they have removed it from certain industries, extending that to most of the industry. I think that can be something which government should look into, and also extending that expenditure on budget or capital, public capital expenditure, which can be actually utilized for more of the skill development at grassroots level. I think that should be the core focus of government. I think we're looking at this. Also, if they can include for that 43B or the payment of 90 days to medium enterprise, I think it can help them to have a control on their cash flow, because we see a lot of gap in the credit facility being availed by them. I think it can help them to facilitate on those. So I think these are some doable thing which we can expect from this build.
All right. Thank you, Samir. Mr. Bhardwaj, what is in your wish list?
Well, our expectations are rather modest, and what we are requesting, or what we have requested to the finance minister, is that let's ensure that whatever you announced in the previous budgets. So she had already announced that there would be a review of SMA. She had announced that there would be no BLR ratings. She had announced that there would be insurance surety would be used instead of the bank guarantees. I think it's time that those see the light of the day. But I would like to use this time and comment on a very important question that you had raised to one of the speakers, and that was that the disparity between the prices of international prices of raw material and domestic prices. I think this is a critical issue, and instead of encouraging manufacturing, it is actually killing MSMEs, systematically killing MSMEs. So whether it is iron, steel, or copper, or aluminum, or plastic raw material like polymers, so what we have seen a spate of duties in form of anti-dumping duties, safeguard duties, and then you have QCOs and all kind of non-tariff barriers that have increased the gap between national and international prices to the tune of 20 to 40%. Now imagine that if you are a cycle part manufacturer and your cycle part can be imported from China at 5 to 7% of duty, and the steel that you are using, the price difference is between 20 to 40%. How can you compete? In manufacturing, this is the most difficult phase that MSMEs are facing, that especially after COVID, taking advantage of the plea of COVID, and then later on about the conflicts, geopolitical difficulties. All the large manufacturers have lobbied with the government, and government have agreed to increase the duties, and that has resulted in a huge disparity between domestic and international prices. I think that's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Bhardwaj. And last but not the least, Vinod, what is in your wish list?
I completely agree with Mr. Bhardwaj, when he talked about the fact that, there's an elephant in the room and none of us want to handle it. There are a well-known list of enterprises in the large sector which have been continuously lobbying the government for anti-dumping, QCOs, and all the other things. And this is precisely what has killed a lot of the micro and small enterprises in India. And this can serve as a warning to the government. And I can, reassure the government that unless we are able to create a mechanism where we help our people with technology upgradation, with upgrading their own quality and bringing it up to the world level where we are expecting, things from outside, it is none of these QCOs and, other things are going to work for the MSMEs. It is going to be contrary to what effect they are expecting. And majority of the times, it will actually mean into costly raw materials, which essentially will again make the products that are produced by MSMEs much more costlier and non-competitive completely. Apart from this, the other 2-3 things that we have requested the government, is in terms of, there's a lot of talk about ESGs, and there's a lot of talk about the fact that MSMEs need to be more sustainable, be more green, but we need to put our money where our mouth is. It's a very simple thing. We are telling MSMEs to do this, do that, but we don't understand where are they going to do it from unless they have some support mechanism. So we have requested the government again that we need to have support for a green initiative for MSMEs to imbibe technology, have better processes, upgrade their equipment, upgrade their machinery, so at least they can compete with whatever is coming from outside. We're not looking at a situation where they'll actually become, exceedingly superb in a matter of couple of years. That's number one. Number two, we have requested the government again, then we need to have a revival and rehabilitation framework which needs to be rehashed completely, which the Honorable Finance Minister has already said last time that is in the works. So we are expecting that will be announced in the budget, wherein the entire SMA mechanism will either be replaced or will there's some mechanism where majority of the cases that are under the SMA framework will be restructured and not closed completely and said that they are not fit for revival. Apart from this, the other third thing that we are expecting is compliance on micro and small enterprises in terms of GST needs to be either done away with fully or needs to be smoothened, because we are seeing on an average every day 10 to 15 complaints of excesses as far as GST compliance is concerned, as far as audits are concerned, as far as rates are concerned, and it is not creating a conducive atmosphere. An entrepreneur cannot spend 50 days of his productive time in a year only on GST compliance, and everyone in the government needs to understand this. If we don't understand this, then we are killing the entire entrepreneurial mindset that we have worked so hard for in this country. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. That was a wonderful session. Let's hope that the upcoming budget addresses these issues and come forth with enabling measures for MSMEs. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.